Hi, it's the TXWaterpolo podcast. I'm James Smith in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and Joe Linehan is still in North Texas. So what's going on, Joe?
Not much. How are you doing up in New Mexico?
It's humidity is very low up here. It's your favorite discussion is weather, so I figured I would go down that route.
Is it?
But it's absolutely lovely.
I don't think my favorite discussion is weather, but that's okay.
It's like you love talking about weather. It's your favorite thing.
Okay, I am younger than 80 years old, so no. So.
Yeah, no, we got out of town apparently at the right time because I guess Austin. You tell me, like apparently Texas is just covered in Sahara dust, so we got out of town.
Apparently, this happens every year too.
I know, but it's worse. Apparently, that's what I've been told.
I never had heard about the Sahara dust storm before. Now it's just everything is off the charts.
Yeah,
like the pandemic, everything is
exactly.
Huge. So
exactly, swarm of locusts next, something like that.
Wasn't it the murder hornet or something like that?
Yeah, I was telling my daughter Kenna, she's 16. I was like, you don't understand. In the 70s, we were all going to die because of killer bees. Like everyone was going to be killed, and these things come and go. Yeah,
that was the 80s as well. So was
it? Yeah, I suppose it was.
So I don't remember the 70s.
Little older than you, Joe. Yeah, we don't have to dwell on that. All right, let's start by saying that the Best of Texas tournament is still ongoing, and you want to know why?
Because you forgot to post it.
Because I forgot to post it. So the finals, which are pretty straightforward, will be up soon, but they have not been posted for this last week. What can I say, man? I've been busy.
So
no, I just screwed up.
So let's review the matchups real quick.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the boys' side, it is Clear Lake High School versus St. Mark's.
Right. And girls?
I believe it's Clark High School versus Baytown Sterling.
There you go. So, those will be up soon. I mean, couldn't be an easier vote, could it?
Get out there and vote, people, please. This is we will not ask you to vote anymore after this, we promise.
Yeah, there's a bit of fatigue, I think, but still, it's important and interesting to know, who people think is basically the best program in the state, and the competition's been really fun. So, one more week, we'll finish it up next week. So, and that'll come out on Twitter and so on pretty soon. So there you go. So that's my mea culpa, but on to more, I suppose, serious stuff. COVID is spiking in our state. I think it's having an effect on some, the very little water polo that's going on. I know that personally for my club, I'm getting a lot of contact about whether our kids will be forced to wear masks in the pool, and they won't. In fact, I would, if we were forced to do that, I would actually probably just suspend practices. It's just not feasible. It doesn't really work. That's my own position, but again, we're really out on the bleeding edge of frankly the entire country. Like we're able to practice as long as we don't have any physical contact. So, and we go through all the other rules and the protocols and so on, but we're still on as far as I know. But as far as other clubs in the state, that might not be the case.
Yeah, I do know there's some clubs that are looking to start next week in North Texas. There's some other clubs kind of looking to start in mid-July. Hopefully we get there and we aren't we don't get shut down, the athletics, etc., because that just seems to where the numbers are trending. Yeah. So we are keeping our fingers crossed that everybody stays safe, and we can get in the water and those clubs can start practicing. But there was a club that is practicing that unfortunately had a COVID case amongst their athletes, and they decided to shut down for the next 2 weeks.
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that was probably the safe and prudent thing to do.
Of course. I didn't know that detail, Joe, that somebody actually caught it. So yeah, that makes a huge difference.
So, I mean, it's one of those things where I believe everybody, all the clubs, the club admins, the coaches, the safety of the athletes and coaches are at the forefront.
Yeah.
Yes, everybody wants to get back in, but we want to get back in a responsible manner.
Yes, of course. We're terribly, terribly fortunate in that regard. But I have already told my athletes, we got to be ready for anything. And that means shutting down. We'll go back to our Zoom schedule, all of that. So this is not, I suppose it's not unexpected, and it's happening in most places or many places across the whole country. So Yeah, we're stuck with this for a while, I suppose, right?
We will see. We will
Yeah,
see. I just think we all just have to just hope for the best,
yeah.
and hope's not a strategy. I have said that before, but I
Oh,
think
that's a
that's
good one.
and I think that hope is all we have right now. So
Some hope. Yeah, I'm a bit pessimistic, as you know.
that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah, I'm worried about Junior Olympics. I really don't. I mean, it's it's a long way out still. We have many months left, but given the way that this thing is spiking and is not entirely predictable, and oh my gosh, yeah, I'm worried about it. But such is life. There you go.
Yeah, and these type of decisions, I'm just hoping that we can maybe start something up in August, and even before we get to that, we have the Welcome to Texas Shootout in San Antonio, the ODP camps in September, October. So there's a lot even
Yep.
before the Junior Olympics. So
Yeah.
we are hoping again, but we do not know, and we are not necessarily making these decisions. So
As I said in the town hall last week, the hurdle, as far as I'm concerned, is body contact. Like, unless you've got that, then you've really got no. I don't know what you have. You have ultimate frisbee tournaments in the pool, but basically, and I'm not downplaying that, by the way. Those are fun, but it's just not the same. So that's the key. Like, once we can establish body contact, then things will be sort of back to normal.
yeah, and there is and we'll talk about this in a little bit. I was talking to some coaches over the last couple of days, and there is some water polo with scrimmaging in Ohio right now.
With body contact.
With body contact. They did it for about a week, and then there's some athletes that it was a rise in the athletes, and not necessarily for water polo, but in football and basketball. So then they decided to kind of hit the brakes, and they went
Yeah.
back to no contact again.
Right. I get that. Yeah. I don't think we're even close to having that chance, and that's fine with me. I understand. I understand why that would be.
But
So,
my niece played in a softball tournament 2 weeks ago.
well, I guess the difference is in for a sport like baseball is like you're not really very close to people all the time, or you don't have to be. So
And
I can
likely
understand that.
like a naturally social distancing sport.
Right, exactly. There's a study that came out of Italy right when things were at their worst, when things were getting shut down, about the safety of different sports. And the sports like swimming and running and all of that were by far the safest for obvious reasons. And then you start getting into the sports where they're spread out or where they're in chlorinated water. And so water polo was that next tier of most safe. Not to say safe, just most safe of any of the sports. So yeah, you could totally understand them. It's like, how about wrestling? That would be no. That's like nothing but
Probably
body
not.
contact. Yeah. All right. There's a lot going on in the next couple months, really, on town halls and coaches to coaches that the Southwest Zone is hosting online. Why don't you fill us down on some of the really key events that are coming up?
Not really the next couple of months, just the next couple of weeks or the next few weeks. Through the end of July, we did restart last week the coach to coaches and town hall meetings. Again, the town hall meetings are on Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. And then the coach to coaches are 12:30 p.m. on Thursdays. We started those last week and they were great. And we are continuing them this week and through the end of July. And we have a whole slate of speakers and coaches that are going to be part of this. As far as the town hall meetings, it's all going to be kind of a roundtable discussions on a singular topic. Like tonight's topic is diversity and inclusion, which is going to be great. Then we're going to be joined by Brenda and John Abdu from USA Water Polo as well. And then next week is a club administration one. Then we have a masters one. Then we're going to have an NJOs one. And then we're going to have a Southwest Zone Events Committee town hall meeting. So
Cool. Do you know who's? Yeah. Do you
Go
know who
ahead.
you've invited for Masters? I'm just curious.
We're still putting that group together right now.
Just wondered. I figured, you got a couple weeks, so that's cool. I was just curious. Yeah, that's a lot of content. I make fun of Joe offline because he's burning the candle at both ends based on my perception of things, and so yeah, there's a lot of stuff coming up, and even if it's not for the next couple months, Joe, it's still a chock full in the next 6 weeks or so.
I have a feeling that at the end of July we might have to take another Zoom break after this little section's done.
You think? Yeah.
Probably.
You think?
Yeah.
I have a suspicion that would be true too. Although you were part of another, I don't know, conference of some kind yesterday. you were speaking to states or the Midwest zone, basically, but that encompassed all the Midwest zone states, and then also, I guess, Tennessee and Georgia joined the call too. What was covered in that meeting?
So kind of Miguel, who is the Southwest Zone, well, no, I'm sorry, the Midwest Zone chair. He asked me to come on the call,
Okay.
and they have a call probably once a month, and it's just their zone board that gets together. They asked me to come because about a month ago I talked to Matt Latham and Paul Splitt, who Matt is kind of coach of club and is involved in high school water polo in Michigan, and Paul Splitt is involved in Ohio and Cincinnati, and we had a good discussion about high school growth. So how did y'all grow the sport of like in Texas? And we just went over the basics. The word kind of spread around a little bit, and Miguel asked me to come on and just kind of go over and just give a brief little recap of that. And there was some representatives from Tennessee and Georgia. The biggest thing is, it's not a slow process, or it's not a fast process. It's you have to get everybody on board. You have to make it as easy as possible to play and lower that barrier to entry. You have to find out what the rules and regulations are for your state association, and then you got to find it in with that state association, whether it's a coaches association, a referee association. So there's lots of avenues for growth, and we just kind of went over that last night.
The Midwest is super interesting to me in that regard. So Texas is pretty, obviously geographically is really big. And I think that, I think people feel like the growth of high school water polo in Texas was kind of luck or something. I don't have a good sense of that. But it is geographically, situated. Whereas like Illinois water polo is Chicago. Like there's very little going on outside the city of Chicago or the suburbs of Chicago as well. And that's not a critique at all. It's just that it's difficult to expand it beyond that suburban area or that urban and suburban area. And the same is true in Missouri. It's St. Louis. It's everybody in St. Louis. So I know that they expanded into Kansas City, I think a little bit. I'm not sure whether that was sustained. But it's hard work, man. You got to find people on the ground who are willing to just start essentially from scratch.
Well, yes, you have to find that, but it's also both Illinois and Missouri. They are already state-sanctioned sports. So right. You have the state association that's going to put in parameters as far as growth that might hinder growth a little bit. It's just really finding. It's like you're not going to find a one high school in Columbus or one high school in Kansas City to start a water polo. You need to find a group of them, a school district.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
And it might be a multi-year process where they have to do a little fundraising, or you start with a club of a bunch of 10 and 12-year-olds that eventually get to high school and they're okay, mom and dad, they want to play high school. So there's a lot of avenues kind of for growth. You just got to be all on the same page and rowing the boat in the same direction.
Yeah, in general, right? There's always going to be some differences, but yes, in general, you have to have the same aim, which is to simply increase the number of available opportunities, whether that's club or at high school. So yeah, absolutely.
And they're doing some great things up in the Midwest zone. Their biggest challenge right now is they all do have different high school water polo seasons.
Yeah, yep.
So it's difficult to create a calendar, year-round calendar for the 18s and 16s. Here we do have one high school season, and then we can create a calendar for 9 months for all the other age groups. Right. And the only age group that goes kind of year-round are the 14s and 12s. So yeah, there's different challenges everywhere, but there's a lot of what works here can work in other places, and that's part of what I do as well. Is I do talk to people outside of Texas about kind of how they can grow in their area, and the same thing I do here. So,
well, speaking of real life, I just got disconnected from the internet. So Joe, you missed out on a lot of really important things that I was saying while I was disconnected. So I might have to circle back with you and just share with them all those deep thoughts.
Next week. Next week. So let's talk about our interview a little bit.
Yeah. So we mentioned the town hall tonight on diversity, and the special guest is the great Brenda Villa, a several-time Olympian, Player of the Year. She has been, asked to be co-chair of the USA Water Polo Racial Equity and Reform Task Force. So that's going to be part of the town hall tonight. But then, luckily, we're going to have an interview with her as well, and we will share that with you next.
All of TX Water Polo is brought to you advertising free, and we'd like to keep it that way. So we're asking for your help. Show your support by going to txwaterpolo.com/give so we can keep covering the sport we love in the Lone Star State.
Hi, this is Natalie Benson, and you are listening to a podcast about water polo in Texas.
Brenda was named Female Water Polo Player of the Decade for 2000 through 2009 by FINA Aquatics World Magazine. She won 4 Olympic medals in water polo. And I didn't know this, but she's the leading goal scorer in Olympic water polo history with 31. Recently, she became co-chair of the USA Water Polo Racial Equity and Reform Task Force. She hopped off a town hall meeting discussion on diversity yesterday, which is already posted at TXWaterpolo. But here she is with us. Brenda, thanks for your time.
Yes, of course. Anytime I get a chance to talk about water polo, I'm all in.
You're a busy woman, so how are you hanging in there with, you've got kids, you've got COVID, you've got clubs, you've got high school responsibilities. What's going on in your neck of the woods?
You know, I coach at a school, at Castellia School, which is an all-girls school, 6 through 12, but I also have other responsibilities at that school. So part of my job is working, well, I guess my title is Equity and Education Coordinator. So there's a lot just going on right now with the events in the world and the reckoning of just systems that are in place that are not, equal for all. So we want to strive for equity. So it is interesting for me to be on this task force for USA Water Polo and also doing similar work in the educational space. So for right now, it's something that I'm thinking about 24/7, and having the kiddos around all day is a challenge. But I think for our family, it's the silver lining of being home during COVID. I get to spend more time with my almost 4-year-old and my 9-month-old. So, it's hectic some days, but I think water polo training allowed me to be okay in this flux, in this area of discomfort. I know that all too well, like in many long, tough swim sets or, traveling around the world, not always with the best accommodations.
Oh, really? Everybody thinks that you stayed in the Ritz when you guys went traveling,
We wish. Sometimes it's 5-hour bus rides after, 12-hour flight, and practice at, right when we get to the hotel. So we're, good training for these times that are just uncertain.
Well, I wonder if you might just go into you're at Castellia. It's a private school in the Bay Area, obviously, and by the way, parenthetically, it was the school that we wanted our daughter to go to if we'd stayed. But what is the plan for the fall, as far as you know, for your students?
We had a town hall this past week, and it seems as though they have various plans. And one of those, if everything stays accordingly, right, with the latest update from Santa Clara County, I think our school could accommodate everyone on campus socially distant.
Okay.
And I think because of the small numbers, it's a single gender school, and the space, it is a potential scenario. I hesitate to say exactly what we're doing, right, because there's still, we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
Especially with this 4th of July weekend coming up. But I'm hopeful that part of that means that the students are on campus, because it is important to have that connection outside of, your computer.
Right. And you have a pool on campus. Are you able to use it at all for training, or is it just not the case yet?
At the moment, we are not using it. We don't really do much over the summer. Coincidentally, last year I started doing more with my high school girls over the summer and was hoping to continue that this year. But for now, we're not in there. We're hoping to propose something so that our school could approve the use of the pool. I think that most of my girls or my students, my athletes, play for the two Stanford Club or Mayfield, but I also know there's some that don't play clubs. So for me, it's an equity issue. It's, we have this pool. We ran practices last summer. Could we run it again for the students that are not playing club, or maybe their parents have decided, half of the season's going to be on Zoom, and let's do something else instead. So I'm hoping we can get into the pool.
Yeah, I talk to Joe about this all the time. He has learned that I'm a little bit of a pessimist about all this. We've been very fortunate locally in that our pool is allowing us to practice with no contact, of course, but I'm not sure how long that's going to last. So I'm curious about what's going on throughout the whole country. So I was curious about what's going on with your school. But
there are other schools in the Bay, other independent schools that are in the pool. I just came from a swim earlier today. So there are pools that are allowing you to reserve a lane and get in there, no contact, no ball. So I'm hoping that at least with that we can swim. I know we missed the swim season at the end of the school year, so It really has been, a lot of months, 100 days being out of the water for some, and that's just unheard of. But as aquatic people, it's not looking good.
Let's get to the heart of the conversation, because I'm going to cite the name of this task force again so that everybody knows. You've been asked to co-chair the Racial Equity and Reform Task Force. I don't think there would be any surprise whatsoever about why this is taking place and why they chose you, for, to be blunt. But so yesterday you were on a town hall featuring Texas coaches, referees, administrators, and I wonder, first of all, maybe if you could just give us the big beats about what are your plans for the task force, even though it's pretty early days.
We're reviewing our systems, what's in place, our policies. We need to make sure that our membership is feeling heard, feeling included. And I don't know that is happening at all levels at the moment. And with all the stories that we heard yesterday, we're missing something. There are some loopholes, right? So we want to make sure that, our overall goals are like zero tolerance. We want to make sure that at every level of USA Water Polo, that everyone's free from racism and bias. And we want these safeguard accountabilities in place. Like, where do I direct one of my athletes to go to if they are being discriminated against, or do they tell a referee? Like, these are things that no one knows where to go to. Who do you talk to? What is a safe space for that? So that's one of our goals. Another goal is access. We want to make sure that we are intentional about increasing participation among communities of color. We need to establish partnerships. We need to expand access to facilities. These are things that, especially for me, that have been on my mind forever. How could it not be, coming from commerce, and access was the reason why I was able to attend Stanford, go to 4 Olympic Games. So that's an area that has always been a passion of mine. Another area is just education. How can we provide our membership with the educational tools to make, our sport inclusive, everyone's respectful, and it's fair, especially for the members of color that do not feel that way. And then the other overall goal is resources. How do we expand our resources to promote tolerance and accessibility within our sport? So these are just 4 big goals that we have in mind. We're in the process of completing the team for the task force. And of course, there have been many hands that have been raised, and like people wanting to help in different in ways. So we're always like, yes, let us know, what can you do, what skills can you bring. Like, we're going to need like data, we're going to need local partners in different parts of the US. So it's going to be, a big team effort. So we will need people that are not necessarily on the task force still collaborating with us. So yeah, we're in the beginning stages, and we're hoping to get moving quickly. And we know that we're trying to make these changes for the long haul, and some might take a little longer than others.
I'm curious about that. You're, filling out your staff essentially. Are those volunteer positions? They're paid positions by a foundation or by USA Water Polo?
It's volunteer. I
Okay.
mean, I'm an athlete rep on the board of USA Water Polo, and John Abdu works for USA Water Polo. So it was one of these things where it's like, does he have the bandwidth? Can we do this? And it's important enough to us where we want to do this. Like, let's make this happen. It's important and it's needed.
Okay. Yesterday's town hall was pretty well attended. I'm assuming that's that's sort of like the spearhead to your effort here. You just described the way that you want to educate and communicate, so on. I'm assuming that was sort of on your agenda.
Interesting that I reached out to Joe to talk about water polo, see, how he was doing, and just he mentioned the town hall and the topic of the town hall. And Abdu and I have been talking about, how we would start this, and we have thought of, we should do town halls like in each zone, or how do we give the members of USA Water Polo an opportunity to talk to us, right? And in this time of COVID and Zoom, it is easier to be everywhere.
It really is.
With a low cost. Granted, some of these conversations I would rather them be in person, but we'll make the most out of it. So when Joe mentioned that the topic was DNI, it was one of those things where it's like, hey, can we just join? We want to listen. We want to hear what's going on in Texas and see if we can support it in any way. So it was just a natural, almost like a pilot, right, to what we hope to do to start off this task force.
Yeah, plus probably a good learning experience in the sense that it was the first one, as we said, and there's plenty of time to do others as well. So yeah, I learned a ton yesterday. I'm assuming you did too.
Yes.
I wanted to go, a couple things. One is that USA Water Polo released its Diversity in Water Polo video series in 2018, one of the features was commerce, and I want to get back to that. But was that a precursor to this task force, or so were there plans in the works before, current events to create it, or is this a new manifestation?
I mean, it's always been on the mind of USA Water Polo to increase access and to, like, how do we make our sport more diverse? It's always been there. Like, John and I always say, like, we've been talking about this for years. And he's like, decades. And then I'm like, okay, John, now everyone knows our age. But, like, really, it has been on the mind. So I don't think that video series, I mean, it just now, the timing of it looks like it was planned, but it wasn't. But I will say that this has been on the mind of USA Water Polo. Like, how do we promote our sport? How do we welcome new members? So it was a great idea 2 years ago to showcase our diversity in these great videos that they put together.
Yeah, and I remember these conversations taking place in the 80s in Southern California. So yeah, this has been around for a long time. I was just wondering about the sort of administration of it from USA Water Polo's perspective. Yesterday on the Zoom call, there were several who said that they held you out as a role model, and why wouldn't they? I'm curious about what does providing role models to different communities, what role does that play in your efforts, and how do you feel about playing that role yourself?
It's huge. It's so important. I mean, representation matters. Seeing yourself is important. I mean, I think back to some of the role models I had, and I'm like, I loved Michael Jordan, before Kobe came to the Lakers, right? So it was like one of those things that's like I look up to these male athletes. And why? Because there weren't that many female athletes that were visible. And then from female athletes, then you even go to like female Latina athletes that were visible. And I remember one athlete that I was always like I always had my eye on was Lisa Fernandez, who was a softball pitcher. Went to UCLA, played on, I believe, a few Olympic teams, and she was somebody that was like, oh my God, like look at her, she looks like me, and she's at this level too. And
Right.
back then, I feel like I didn't see that many. So for me, it's really important to have role models. And how can little girls dream if they don't see themselves? I mean, how do they? I mean, everyone dreams, right? But how do you make those dreams like big dreams if you don't see them at that high level? Like, you just think it's not possible, or do you not even dream about it, right? Then you might shift your focus. You're like, no one's done it before. Maybe I don't want to do that. And then maybe you change and you switch to another sport. But no, it needs to, we need more of it. And I say, if not me, who? And I don't mean to sound egotistical in any way, but I know that there's not that many. So I want to remain visible so that I can inspire. And I know that I was very fortunate to be a part of the Commerce program and the legacy there and what the city invests in their youth. So I'm always looking to pay it forward.
Well, you just answered a question too, because I'm curious about how you feel personally about filling that role. It sounds to me like you're more than willing to do it, but would you rather not, in the sense that you would rather there not be a need for something like that?
I guess that's my dream now, right?
Yeah.
To work towards me not needing to be visible anymore. And
Right.
I joke with friends and colleagues or people that have kids in the game, and they still bring up my name, and I'm like, I'm sorry guys, like you keep hearing about me, but I'm not going anywhere until there is so many other Brenda Villas, other Patty Cardenas that you're like, oh yeah, Brenda, okay, and here's 10 other Latina athletes that you can name that maybe have made like a national team or an Olympic team. We have a lot, especially from Commerce, that have made it to the collegiate level, which is great. So it's like, how do we increase those numbers? And could it be, outside of Commerce? And I know there are others, but it's like, we need more.
Well, let's talk about that. So Commerce, first of all, we should probably step back and maybe you could describe your own experience coming up through that historic program. It's been historically successful, that's for sure. And then we can talk a little bit maybe about how that model might fit elsewhere. But first of all, just share with people who might not know about what it is that's so special about that program.
So Commerce in I believe, early 1970s, the city decided to fully fund, I guess, their Parks and Rec department, right? So any youth sports in the city were available to everyone at a low cost or no cost. So that really was a game changer for the families in that community that were predominantly Latinx, Hispanic, and lower income. So here you have a city that says, we know that our families are working hard. We know that both parents are working all day. So can we invest in our parks and rec so that our kids in our community are at the parks playing sports and not tempted to get into distractions that are around? So it just created this culture of kids always being at the park or playing. Like I remember playing softball, basketball, volleyball, you name it. The city only has, I believe, 13,000 residents. It's pretty small, but it has 4 parks. So growing up, you were identified by which park you played your sport at, and they had like inner park squads, and there was all-star teams where they picked the best teams and then go play other cities. So it was really a robust sports program for youth that just kept you busy. And then on top of all that, you had aquatics, which was slightly different, where everyone could take swim lessons at a low cost. And if you wanted to join the team, you joined the team. And the swim team and the water polo team were under one umbrella where you did both, right? There wasn't this competition of, oh, it's the swim team has this pool time. It was split evenly. And you swam 2 days, you played 2 days, and everyone just did both. So it just worked out really well.
How do you think that decision came about? Because that is not a traditional model in the sense that a pool is built, an aquatics program probably begins. You could imagine that most experience it so that the swim team gets priority. And maybe this is an exceptional case, but was that part of the decision from the beginning? Was that there was going to be sort of equally played?
As far as I know, and I know that, Santa Anita, who, if you don't know that name in water polo, you should. She was a pioneer at Commerce. So she was an Olympic swimmer who swam for the city and then ended up working for the city. And she wanted her swimmers to be able to do not cross training, but a different type of training to keep them in the water and not have them burn out. So I'm not sure if it started with her and then it was just this genius idea and it just kind of stuck. And because the city doesn't have an interest in the sense of which of the two programs is more successful, it would be easy for them to just say you have to split the time.
Right. Well, I never knew that. I grew up in Long Beach. We played Commerce all the time, but at Beach Swim Club, it was this was the swim season, this was the water polo season. There was no combination during the week. So that is fascinating and actually darn unique, I think, in the country where you're split equitably from the start.
Yes, and I'm not gonna say, I don't know if in the last however it has shifted. I know that water polo has been trying to get more time in, so I don't know if it's outside of swimming hours, but there's a protected time slots throughout the week where they collaborate equally. I don't know what else they've added. They get creative, right, with knowing that they need to play more to stay competitive.
Well, I suspect there's probably not an area in the country that doesn't experience competition between the swim and the water polo side of aquatics. So that doesn't surprise me. I wanted to go back very quickly. You implied at least that the effort for the creation of the program was semi-grassroots. It was based on families who wanted their kids to have something to do. Do I have that right? Did the city also recognize that need from the start? What is your recollection?
I believe the city recognized that first. So I think the city was just, this pool, the state of the art pool was built in in the 1960s. I know that the water polo team, because Bobby created a shirt that says established 1971. So that year sticks in my head. But there was this great facility that was built in this city. And Commerce has a lot of business in it, right? And a lot of residents. So the tax revenue from the business allows the city to make decisions like investing so much in parks and recs and youth sports. So, it is kudos to the city council or whoever was in charge back in the mid 60s, right? That really envisioned this city where if you helped out parents, then you would have this great tight-knit community that was focused on family.
Well, that's also super interesting because I didn't think about the fact that Commerce is a very industrial city, and that's the foundation of the tax base that's required to probably or raising bonds, whatever it takes to build a facility. So that was really where this came from, was the fact that the city is largely industrial and maybe less residential than you might expect.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's the anomaly, right? People are oh, Commerce, it could be so easily done. And I'm like, no, it can't be, unfortunately. But why can't we get creative? Why can't we think outside the box? Or why can't we partner with cities and say, hey, like this is going to help you? And that's what we're kind of in the process right now with like the task force or like other members that want to see a change that are not necessarily directly involved in the task force. You know, they want to know, like, how do we convince other cities to invest more in this when we know that it produces like higher, you know, college graduation rates or high school graduation rates or whatever, you know, the data is going to tell us.
Right.
So, I mean, it is an interesting and unique place, but I do think that we could get a lot of information from the commerce model to help us create other models for other cities or other partnerships, right? It's not always city, it could be like YMCAs, or it could be, I mean, I don't know. There's hopefully the listeners to your podcast, right? Somebody might have an idea, and it's like, yes, like we need to get creative and we need to be able to share those ideas.
But I think there might be some big themes that you might want to suggest. You know, the success of your program at Commerce when you were there was based on a few things. One was you're looking for a place for kids to go. And why wouldn't a community want that? You're doing so in order, I would think, to achieve those things that you're talking about, higher graduation rates, those kinds of things. So these kinds of themes, it seems to me, are the ones that you're able to translate well, almost regardless of geography. And you let me know if that's not what you think.
No, I mean, you're right. I think like sports and city, and it's interesting. It makes me think about in coming back from the Beijing Olympics, right? There was 2 commerce girls on that silver winning team, and there was actually a boxer, 2 boxers, brothers. One competed for Mexico, one competed for commerce. And you think of this small city that has 13,000 residents and produces 4 Olympians. Like, are you kidding? Like, what's in the water, right? So I think that it's just showing that if you are going to invest in programming for young kids, there are many things that can come out of that, right? Like whether it's Olympians or it is higher high school graduation rates, engagement in your city. Like, why wouldn't any city want that? You're right. It's not just these lower income communities, or is it? Because then if you have the means, are you going outside of your city to play on an all-star team?
Right. Yeah.
So I brought this up because I remember coming home, they had this like tagline, like homegrown heroes. And everyone was like, well, isn't everyone a homegrown hero? And I'm like, no, actually, no, you are not. Like, the city is, you know, very proud of this, and they should be. And it doesn't go for everyone. Did you play in the city you grew up in? No, like we did.
Right.
And everyone on our club team, you know, essentially lives in that city unless your grandfather and if your grandparents, you know, live there. But like, it's, yeah. So, I mean, this would help every community, but I do think that it might be more helpful in communities with less resources.
I would think so too. I don't think there's nothing wrong with that. Because, well, let's just talk about that place geographically. Like, you and I both are close to Menlo Atherton and to the Menlo School and to Sacred Heart. You know, I think it's fair to say that they're not in need of funding as much as other places would be. So I don't think there's any problem with the idea of taking a model, or at least these big themes that we're talking about, and trying to help other areas to do that. And I sort of want to get into that now, so that in the terms of Texas itself. So you visited the Rio Grande Valley, I think a couple years ago, or maybe it was 2017. Time is really flying. And down there, you met one of my favorite people in Texas water polo, is Jonathan Landero, who has done a great job of growing aquatics overall. I don't particularly care about the swimming part, I'll be honest, but the water polo has been fantastic. You went down there, and what Joe and I will talk about often is, taking the commerce model and applying it elsewhere. And we just got done talking about that. But what is it that you observed when you were there, and maybe you had some ideas about what the things that they're doing right, the things that they might improve upon?
Well, the one thing that struck me was the pool that I was at. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the pool belongs to the school district, and there's
Right.
4 different high schools that get allotted pool time.
Correct.
So in some ways, it reminds me of commerce, right? Like you have these 4 high schools that have to practice at this one pool. So imagine how many teams you could create with that.
Right.
So I think it's a special model that I think with support and resources, I'm excited and like curious to see where it could go. In talking to Jonathan, I think their biggest challenge, and I think this is a challenge for a lot of isolated club teams, right? Is how do you get the competition, and
Yeah.
how do you always have to travel? And if you always have to travel, then it's more expensive for you. And then is that possible? So in speaking to him, it's like, well, can we get creative about ideas of inviting people down to you so you don't have to travel, but you still get the games? So
Right.
like, how do we make that happen? So I think part of this task force, right, will be how do we partner with clubs or with areas or with high schools or and kind of brainstorm with them. And it's like, look, these models, this model, the commerce model or the Chicago Park model or the Chicago Park District model or this club team in Florida, like they all made it work this way. So can we take a little bit of each program and make it work for you? Because every program is so different. And like, I can't say that I know that community well enough to tell you exactly what'll work, but I do think that getting more games keeps kids more, like, it keeps them interested longer. And it also creates this energy, right? And this place where like parents and family, it becomes like a family affair. Like, oh, there's this tournament, let's go. And oh, let's bring your cousin. And and it just exposes more people to our game.
Well, and you just said it, like it's a community, and that was a sense. I've never been down there, so I'm looking forward to visiting it. But you said it's a community, and that's a theme that we just talked about.
Yes.
That's common with commerce, and so I'm curious about maybe that as one of the key ingredients, at least in the kind of model that you and I think are talking about.
Yeah, and is it, and then that makes me think, and can you build this type of community that I was used to growing up? Is that possible in these, not all-star teams, I won't say that, but these bigger club teams where you have maybe 10 or 15 different cities represented under one banner?
Well, you don't have to call them all-star teams, but I will, because that is what they are. You can be diplomatic, but that's
Okay.
exactly what they are. You talk a lot about Stanford Club, and I know you have extremely tight ties with that university, and why wouldn't you? But oh boy, if people knew how these kids sort of go from one club to another, depending on tournaments and stuff, there's nothing illegal about it, but they don't have that same sense of community. They have a sense of community, but not the same kind.
And then then you just talk about another area, right? Like pool space, access, like how many pools are there? So if like one team has the pools, like how do we make it all work so that you
Right.
create more teams or more competition? And if they're smaller teams, is it easier to partner with? And can we make it more inclusive that way? Because then, the coach, I have all 20 of you in front of me, I know you all really well, so we could have these uncomfortable conversations if they come up. We can address things that come up. And is it harder at a bigger club, or the administrator and everyone? Yeah, I mean, my club has never really been more than what, Commerce Club, I mean, total swimmers and water, like probably 100 kids. And that's like swim team, men's water polo, boys and girls water polo. So I've
Right.
never been a part of a club team that has been really big. So I wouldn't know another model.
As somebody who played against Commerce back in the day, that doesn't even sound right in the sense that you guys were everywhere, like every tournament, and still are. I mean, your presence is very well known at JOs, big tournaments like that, and you just have tons of teams. So, I mean, from a distance, it looks like there's 10,000 kids as a part of that program. But I'm fascinated to know that it wasn't quite that big.
No. I wish. I remember at JOs, I'd have to play 3 finals because we didn't have enough people.
Exactly. Well, and you mentioned earlier in the conversation Patty Cardenas, who was your teammate on the '08 team in Beijing. I want to go back and talk about that and hopefully be a little honest about what's going on. So 9-8 final, silver medal to the Dutch. I was writing about this team at the time. It was really, really got sort of entered into the writing fray with Total Water Polo. And I think it's fair to say that that was a surprise ending, that the USA was favored in that game by at least American observers, maybe not European observers. But I'm wondering what your recollections are of that final match in particular, because you had a pretty good tournament, obviously. You got to that spot. But what was it about that match that you might remember the most?
Okay. Well, I mean, I will say that I can't believe going into, was it the fourth quarter where we tied?
I had the score up earlier, and now I don't. Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, right. So to be down 5-0 and then to be starting the fourth quarter tied, like I am so angry with myself because for years I did not, like in my head, we had failed so bad and I didn't give us credit. Like, yes, people, like teams start off slow, but I mean, how many teams could come back the way we did and then still have a shot at winning to like the end? Like there was a rebound and I like, so, I'm upset at myself for the way I reacted after that game. But what I will say is we were favored to win. I think people forget that the Dutch have historically been an amazing water polo powerhouse, right? In the 90s, they were the team to beat. And who knows, right? Like we beat them twice in Sydney in the semifinal. They were arguably one of the best teams. They ended up fourth. So like, who knows how long that was with them, right? Yeah. But, we had injuries. I think we just started off slow and it happens and we fought our way back and we just, couldn't get out of it. And people talk about like De Bruyne who scored that many goals and
7.
Could we have like shut her down? But then do people say anything when Maggie had 7 goals against Hungary to help us?
Right.
Like it happens and you could have a game plan around it. You can switch everything and triple team somebody, but like you have a game plan and that's not to say that person's not going to score ever again. Right. So it just, right. It's interesting and the conversations and things that people say. I'm proud of the team and I'm really just sad that I wasn't a better captain in that moment at the end to like really bring us together and reflect on, my goodness, how did we fight back? Like we were not going to let this slip away. So yeah.
That's something to go look at, actually, is if I don't know where you can find the footage anymore because the Olympic Channel has taken over all that stuff or NBC. But that is the truth is like, you put it bluntly, and it's true. You came out pretty slowly and then boom, just roared back. But I heard an anecdote from somebody who I think would know, but you tell me if this is not the case. The third place game beforehand or whichever game was beforehand went into like double, triple overtime. Yeah. And so I what I understood was that you had these plans for how you're going to warm up, so on and so forth, and they got a little screwed up. And so, but now the thing is that affects both teams. So was that an equal factor for both you and the Dutch, or did it have any particular? Was there a difference between the two?
Yes, it affected both teams, but who knows if the Dutch prepared for that?
Right.
We don't know that, right? Like, and hindsight and that's a silver lining, like, haha, double pun there. But for London, it helped us. Same situation. So who knows how the Dutch prepared for that? I don't know that, but I do know that that team compared to like the '04 team, we had 10 first-time Olympians.
Right.
On the Olympic stage, as much as you prepare to make it, like, it's just playing water polo. You pass, you shoot, you swim. But who knows? Like, in that moment, I think because we were favored, maybe that was a factor. The longer you wait to get going, it could have it could have been, something that affected us.
Right.
But it sure wasn't going to affect us again in London, right? Like.
Right. Well, that's what I was just going to get to, because my understanding, again, from somebody who I think would know, was that was completely planned out. So there was any sort of change in plans, you guys were prepared for it.
Yeah, but how would we have known that in London if we didn't know that from Beijing? So, like,
precisely, right.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm like,
One of the main learnings. No, that this is what's so fascinating, and it sort of rolls into it. This is a little bit parallel, but go into the difference maybe just from the strategic level. Like, what was the difference between the '08 and '12 team? And the first thing is that the '08 team was young, but I'm also curious about that thing. Like, you were part of the 4 Olympic teams, and each time there would be new people on it. And so from a distance, it looks, from me, USA women's national team is my favorite team in the world. Like, they're the most interesting and fun team to watch. And they just seem monolithic. Like, one person might retire or whatever, and someone steps up, and it's just, don't miss a beat whatsoever. So there's a culture involved there as well. Is my perception correct?
Yes, I would say that. I mean, the pipeline runs deep, and there is so much talent, and I do believe that, someone retires, someone's injured, someone steps in. Yeah.
And was that the case also? I mean, obviously it was the difference between '08 and 2012, and then they also have you've experienced both of these things, and you had reflections on the way that you behaved in '08, and I assume that you changed that as well.
Yeah, I mean, let's see. I still think that I mean, you're young, you have experiences, you have training, you have, and I just think as the women's Olympic era continues, right? The legacy of women's water polo, like, all these experiences go with the team.
Right.
Right. So we didn't have that in 2000, right? Like, oh my God, last minute, last second goal. Like, even the experience of Athens, where we had so many returners, we were like so experienced, favorite to win. We end up with the bronze. But
Right.
Are there lessons learned there? Yes. And like,
absolutely,
all the athletes hear these stories, know these stories, to learn from those experiences. Yes. Like, I've had many conversations with Maggie about different things, right? And the great thing about her is she's always learning, she's always asking questions. And that's something that I'm really grateful for the current women's team. It's like they proudly carry the legacy of everything in this Olympic era with them, and even some of the stories from the non-Olympic era, right?
Right.
Maggie's coach, Maureen O'Toole, was her age group coach, so she knows stories of even before the Olympic era. So it's really neat to see how all these experiences can hopefully help in situations where maybe the team hasn't been in before, but can kind of tap into those.
And you're sort of an alumni now. So do you have a relationship with the team still? Of course, you can go on the deck and everybody's going to know who you are. But do you sort of know what's going on with the team as well, or you have a deeper understanding of it?
I will say that it's nice to still have like Mal and Maggie on the team, right? Because that's some of us from London's connection still to the current team. And also, like, Adam has done a good job of making sure the alumni are invited, are a part of the present. So it's actually really, really nice to have this culture and have, whichever new coach or coaches step in, kind of respect that and want to continue that. So what did we do? Oh, for Rio, Stanford hosted their like going away event. Roomba to Rio. I can't even remember the slogan for that one, but they honored the 2000 team. So it was the first time that all of us on that 2000 team were in the same space at the same time, and it was so much fun. So, thanks to Stanford Club, but also the national team and USA Water Polo, we made it happen. And I think that's something that's really important. So it's fun to be an alumna and still be part of it. We were on a Zoom call with the team when they postponed the Olympics.
Oh, that's right.
So there's a great relationship. Some are deeper than others, but I hope they know that we're all here and just a phone call away. And I think they know that.
Well, we can talk about that forever because there's obviously going to be huge disappointment about not being able to go this summer. And then, again, I told you before, I'm a bit of a pessimist. So next summer, too, might be in danger. It's the last thing I would even want to contemplate, but that's the case. And you will probably be asked to give some guidance at that point about what they're going to do career-wise and such. So, but thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to talk with you about a wide variety of things.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for having this podcast. We need more podcasts. We need more stories. We need more water polo talk, and this all will help with like growing our sport and making it an inclusive sport. So thank you for the time you put into this.
Sure, we need good podcasts though, so do not count this one as one of those. Joe and I talk about that all the time. It's like I'm looking forward to hiring somebody to take my spot. So, but thank you for the compliment. I do appreciate it. And that was Brenda Villa, 4-time Olympian and maybe the best women's water polo player of all time. Thanks again. Well, that's it. That was Brenda Villa, and we want to thank her very much for spending time with us and talking specifically about Texas. Joe, I've heard you've turned into a moving company. You're under contract, but things are, might change, which is fine. But apparently you're all packing up in a big old truck. You're going Beverly Hillbillies.
So we are recording this on June 30th.
Yeah.
And I'm driving down with a 26-foot U-Haul tomorrow on July 1st. So there you go.
How much shrubbery do you think you're going to damage on the way down?
I'm getting the insurance on the truck.
Yeah, if your car's sideswiped on anywhere in the corridor of 35, then you know where it's coming from. Yeah, good luck with that.
I'll be going slow in the slow lane. So there you go.
Yeah, moving. What a delight. How fun is that? All right, that's it for today. Anything else we need to mention before we get out of here?
Well, happy 4th of July. Yeah, for everyone. Stay safe this weekend.
Yeah.
Thank you, and don't forget to you get a vote for the Best of Texas Part 2, and
better do that.
Then the town hall meetings, the Southwest Zone town hall meetings, are at 6:30 p.m. on Tuesdays, and the Coach to Coaches are on 12:30 p.m. on Thursdays. They are recorded and saved and posted at TXWaterpolo.com. So please just, if you haven't caught one, please catch one kind of moving forward. And if you want to catch up, there are plenty to catch up with.
Yeah, good stuff. I heard from somebody who is fairly high up in the ranks of coaches, and who said that Texas is really leading the way with all things, social media and educational and so on. So yeah, go check that stuff out. It's actually good stuff. It's not just for people from Texas. But anyway, all right, we're done. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks, James.
And thanks again to Brenda Villa for taking the time to talk with us. And thank you, of course, for listening and telling a friend about the TX Water Polo podcast. Find us at txwaterpolo.com, like Joe said. And you'll be able to listen to the podcast, although I keep getting mixed things, like whether it's better to just go straight to Apple. That's most of our listeners are on Apple, which is good for me in several ways. You can find us on social media, leave comments, give to the cause, and stay up to date with the state of the game in Texas under these strange times. But until next week, so long from Santa Fe.
And wear your mask.
This has been a production of TWP Sports LLC.